system, everyone's a victim. Doesn't matter if you're black or white, it hates you all. Here inside the system, violence is a symptom. Fighting for what's right, but somehow everyone is wrong.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Today we have another episode around the virtual campfire. And today we have Luda with us. We have Mr. Bombadil, and we are going to discuss a lot of amazing things. The secrets here in the Nordics. We are going to talk about crypto AG and IG Farben, two very, very important subjects that deep state here in the north have kept hidden from us, and very exciting. Welcome, Luda.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, M.
Yes, pleasure to have you here. Mr. Bombadil, take the floor.
Thank you very much. I am so honored to be with you guys here. Hanging around with you young people, me being the old people, or old fourth, as they say. So yeah, IG Farben.
IG Farben, crypto
IG
AG.
Farben.
Yep.
Today, this is actually a very actual topic, because today we implemented in Mordor, Falukorv, Sweden Incorporated, whatever you want to call it. Maybe one of the strangest places on earth, actually, when we come to this. So today we implemented a draconian law. The government implemented and we have a two-part system here. So our justice system is political, which is very strange, but it is the way it is. So the draconian law implemented now is that it actually will be considered hate speech and can throw you in jail rather quickly if you in any way, shape or form denies the Holocaust or even question it. This is very strange. It seems to be a psyop. According to me, it's a big psyop. And if that psyop is what it is, then it aims to IG Farben, because IG Farben were the big evil military, chemical, industrial, electrical, you name it, they got it all. Hegemony of the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and then of course after the war it remorphed into, well, we save that for later, but it morphed. You could say that IG Farben is a morphed East India Company plus the surroundings of that. The beginning of the military industrial complex comes with the East India Company. You have Dutch designed speed ships, speed warships. They were called the flying ships. They were outstanding with Swedish guns or cannons.
Another thing to just point out there now in the beginning with IG Farben is that most of the directors of IG Farben were the bank owners. So it also woves in. And I just want to point out the first thing that you said with this new draconic law is that it's not the view in itself. It is that it is a law that prohibits freedom of speech. And that is massive. So I just wanted to put that in. But go on, man.
Yeah, of course, it straight cuts off freedom of speech. It's a 180 degrees. It's totally in controversy to freedom of speech, and hopefully this will stir up some real reactions around. But most likely among the IG Farben manufactured orcs, so to speak, from the orcs, they were in Tolkien's story that they were sort of manufactured or grown inside the mountain or the hill.
And also during the Second World War, the guy with the funny mustache, he also had a sort of baby factories, which is kind of like a metaphor for it, right? And also, isn't it really strange that history is there, but we should be able to revision it, and there's no other law prohibiting us from revisioning other chapters in the history book. But this one in particular is very, very strange. You're not allowed to question it. I'm not sure about you, but I don't deny that a lot of people died in working camps during the Second World War.
The
I don't.
IG Farben working camps. Let's be very clear about that.
IG Farben
Yeah.
working camps. Yeah, because they were the ones behind it, and they also had paid labor, but they didn't really pay that much, and they paid the SS. And yeah, but I mean, we're not allowed to question it. But what if there was more people that died, for example, that we don't even know about? How can we know if we're not allowed to question it?
And of course, as per usual, prisoners of war will be used for labor camps. This even occurred in Norway. This is a very strange story. It's not IG Farben directly, but it has a pretty good touch on it.
Yeah.
So in Norway during the war, after the Germans were in control of Norway, the alloy factory on Herøya in Norway had slave labor, both Norwegian prisoners of war and from other countries. And this factory is then controlled by Hydro, which in this particular moment is Wallenberg and some AD. So this is, and the company is still there, so it never changed hands. It could just continue operations, but they got slave labor because, to feed the German fighter plane or bombing plane industry. The alloy was, of course, a very strategical product. So this is why the Norwegians are, the Norwegians that know about this, they are a little bit like, we don't really want to. They are not so fond of the Swedish, let's call it oligarchy.
Yeah,
and these guys, they were pretty involved in IG Farben as well. So IG Farben, just let me finish up very quickly. It grows out of the East India Company. It's the same players, it's the same bankers that do this. And it all goes hand in hand because the military industrial complex is formed alongside the East India Company. They had as a private military, the largest private military and naval operation ever. They have their own ships, they have their own shipyards, they have their own military industrial complex, more or less Europe based. And it is more or less Sweden, Holland, and the UK that is sort of joining forces here. So there are several different East India companies, but the main one is, of course, the one based out of London, out of the city of London, the Viking city of London, which William the Conqueror started. So they just dropped it 1874 when the 1871 coup d'etat on the American Constitution and banking system is completed. Well, the banking system is not completed, but it's set to be the Fed a little bit later on. So,
and just to say that one of the guys who was in the beginning of the Fed was Paul Warburg.
Yeah, and it's, and the Warburg Bank is the dominant bank in Germany. Yeah. The Warburgs are sitting on the board of IG Farben. Yep. And then the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, where you have all the Nobel Prize laureates, they pop up everywhere. It's on full speed ahead. The plan for the Third Reich project was to run everything within inside Germany to be self-supplied. So, synthetic fuel, and they go all the way doing this. And of course, there is a little bit of a Norwegian story to put in here. The inventor, the brilliant Mr. Birkeland, he dies 1917 all alone in a hotel room in Tokyo. He is the one that discovers and knew the power of uranium. His research just disappears. By accident, one of the Wallenberg brothers happens to be the special envoy, more or less the ambassador, trade ambassador, the first one. He happens to be there at this same time, but the research disappears. And suddenly, Otto Hahn and Otto Hahn and Lise Meitner at the Radiological Institute, part of the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, that is founded and paid for by Rockefeller, just by incident. You spread this out a little bit, but it's a part of the IG Farben. Suddenly they knew a whole lot about this. The only tricky thing here is that Mr. Birkeland was a business partner in this hydro, Norwegian hydro that I mentioned before, with Eide and Wallenberg, Marcus Senior. So in the midst of this, suddenly the Germans are way ahead on this, and this is then in the 1920s and so on. So this will take a little bit of time before, and then we have the war drums ramping up. The Bank for International Settlements is in place, and then Lise Meitner ends up in Sweden, and she is the one, for all American listeners, that sits under the Wallenberg company of a Swedish phosphate factory in Ljungaverk, Sweden, where you also manufacture the heavy water needed to do an atomic weapon. And at the same time, they're doing the same stuff in Germany. So they are, both sides are working with the, developing a nuclear weapon.
Yep.
However, Lise Meitner is the one that decodes the trigger together with her cousin. And previously, in the early 1930s, her friends from the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, they are moved way ahead of the paperclip operation. They are already in place in the Manhattan Project for some reason. Nobody knows why, or maybe. So without the Wallenbergs providing Lise Meitner with what she needs, and the heavy water, of course, to do this, there would be no Manhattan Project. They would never have succeeded. Not in time to do the Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which then is the Hirohito. It travels, the Japanese emperor, more or less the day after his 18th birthday, he travels to Sweden and receives his Seraphim order, and then he goes back and have to wait for his part of the succession order in the Japanese emperor family. He refuses to capitulate, even if he's generous and so on, says no. But anyways, and IG Farben and the
I'm just gonna stop you there,
Yeah.
Bombadil, for a second. So just to recap what we just went through, if I understand correctly, and tell me if I'm wrong. But so basically, Birkeland, he was the one that found out about atomic energy, and he was in Japan. And he sent a letter to the Wallenbergs here in Sweden, where he told them about this
1906.
he told them about this new source of energy. And basically what happened was a couple of years later, 11 years later, he was killed. At least he took suicide in a hotel room, right?
Strange suicide, a very strange suicide, actually. So
a few of them.
To talk about Birkeland, but
a few of these suicides in history, and then basically Lise Meitner. There was an article here in Sweden in Expressen around 1950 that says the fleeing Jewish woman, she stole the most dangerous power from the guy with the funny mustache, roughly, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That article actually was published, if I remember correctly, more or less the day after Hiroshima and Nagasaki lucky, and she went on a tour to the US and met her old friends there, including, of course, Oppenheimer and Einstein and these guys.
Yeah. And funny thing is that internet remembers.
Yeah. And this is not, this is obvious. So if you look at the Hollywood thing about it, it's not correct at all.
Yeah.
It doesn't show this. This is the hidden hand, guys. Is the hidden hand. You will. This is what we are trying to tell people, that, yeah, you have the Rothschilds, you have Rockefellers, and so on, and nobody knows about the Wallenbergs, but they most likely are the strongest power within this. Let's call it the military industrial complex, the internet, telecom, power, current and currency, transportation, the Nasdaq, that is fully controlled by these guys. And Nasdaq runs the 150 stock markets platforms as well,
And also
the FX market.
Yeah, and also what happened was in '99 here in Sweden, we had a Swedish state public research that made a paper where they went through what happened during the Second World War. And speaking of the Warburg Bank that we talked about, it came out that the Wallenbergs, this family that owns so much around the world, they were trying to buy the Warburg Bank by selling their stocks, which they were the majority holder in IG Farben's mother company
in Germany.
And this is history we have not heard so much about. I'm sure that could be a reason why we're not allowed to question the official narrative. What do you think, Lura?
Well, when you talk about Norsk Hydro, you also have the Herbert Lippet, the nefarious man who was during the Nuremberg trials. The Allies said that he was the most dangerous man in Europe. And if you ask any Swede who this is, they 99% chance have no idea who it is. And he was the director and the one main owner, not owner, but the leader of IG Farben in Sweden. And as we also know, as Bombadil have said, Voldeman von Knirem, who withhold all the patents for IG Farben, was in Sweden.
Yeah, he took them out of Germany at the end of the war. He was, and Voldemar, he's a very special person. You have to recognize this. He's also the mentor of one of the, let's call it eugenics, the leader of eugenics, Rosenberg. Rosenberg and Goering had to die at Nürnberg, and they did. Goering, he was the liaison officer between IG Farben and the little guy with the mustache and his entourage, so to speak. He was also, believe it or not, living in Sweden for quite a while. In 1920, he will meet his future wife, and she was a true eugenics national socialist, a complete, let's call it, bought into that kind of activities. Her brother-in-law will be a gentleman called von Rosen.
That's the connection.
That's the connection. So Karin will marry, she will divorce and she will marry Goering.
Yeah.
And this is at the same point in time. This is in early February 1920. Goering and von Rosen is flying from Stockholm to Rackestad Slott, which is castle, and there he will be seated down. And this is an adventurous flight. The point is here that von Rosen, he is an excellent pilot. He even is the one that provides the Finnish Air Force with their first planes. He gives them to them for some reason. And the Finnish Air Force, they will keep the swastika, which is the weapon of von Rosen. They will keep that until 2018, 2020 on their airplanes.
Yeah.
So it is a fantastic story when you see this with the symbolism and so on. And von Rosen is ever present during the build-up in the 1930s. He's a personal friend of Göring. You could call him handler, you know. So Göring, he lives in Sweden, but he has the whole insight in this. And at the end of the war, or after the war, the American military intelligence services hunting von Rosen a bit. They want to have him prosecuted for flying out valuable items, treasures, art, and so on from Germany. He is an excellent flyer. So why he picked up? He didn't need to have Göring flying a plane for him to go and land on the sea. It was icy, winter, snowstorm. He didn't need him, but he picked him up at the airport in Stockholm and said, "Hey, come on, you can. Anybody crazy enough to fly me?" And Göring, being a fighter ace, flying with the Red Baron on the First World War, but he was also a man on the PTSD and whatever. But he takes this flight. Of course, it was set up, So he lands there, the swastikas, the fire, getting some nice drinks and so on, getting the warmth up. And in steps a beautiful blonde girl, which he will be marrying just very soon after that. And that is also, he meets her and the swastika at the same time. Because
and
the
I want to come in here and say that two things I want to put in. And the first thing that Bombadil is going to love is that in the previous episode that me and M is talking, I'm talking very shortly about Erich von Rosen, but I say fucking Goebbels and not Göring. So I do the big mistake there. I don't know why I said Goebbels, but if you listen to that, I will say wrong there. So it is Göring. And the other thing you mentioned, Alfred Rosenberg, and the 1920s there, because they create something called the Thule Society, 1919. And this is where Alfred Rosenberg and Hitler meet in this society. And this is a society of 1,500 individuals, bankers, police, politicians, doctors, engineers, collective. Just pointing that in,
basic secret society, you could call it. It's not even secret. It is the powers that is connected to the IG Farben, of course. This is
what other insurance company also is named Thule?
Thule Insurances. But let's not jump into that one, because I just wanna, if you don't mind, I'm just gonna read from Profit Over Life very short about IG Farben, and this is during the Nuremberg war crime trials, and this is what Telford Taylor, U.S. Chief Prosecutor, in his opening statement in the trial against IG Farben, the executives at the Nuremberg War Crime Tribunal, 1947. This is what he said. Their purpose was to turn the German nation into a military machine so it could impose her dominion on Europe and later on other nations beyond the seas. They were the warp and woof, the essential fabric of the dark mantle of death that settled over Europe. So this is a big deal for people who haven't heard about IG Farben, right?
It should be.
Yeah. Big deal.
Since they sort of never, they never quit. They just moved a bit. They did a morph thing, but we will get into that. There are so many twists and turns in. But as you said, the Thule insurance company made an offer to all the small European insurance company that they could not resist.
Yeah, and Thule Insurances was in Sweden, right? It was
Yeah,
And
actually the
this,
famous
yeah,
Prime Minister Olof Palme's grandfather, Sven Palme, who was involved in starting this Thule Insurances. And it always, I am amazed by, the Nazis. They kind of knew which doors to knock on. They kind of knew where all the loot were beforehand, I wonder how.
yeah, that's a mystery, isn't it? Many
yeah,
people have thought about this many times.
Yeah.
But Thule Insurance, they created what today is totally natural, the reassurance market. They created that, and they gave all the small insurance companies all over Europe. They gave them such a good deal that they could not resist.
Yeah, and all these
so
small
they knew.
insurances, yeah, all these small insurances, they had obviously lists of what they
Yeah,
were insuring.
yeah, they had a pretty good register, a
A register.
central
Yeah,
register that Thule said,
yeah.
and maybe
And
they
just to
knew
put in, I
somebody.
just want to put in the bridge because Voldemar von Knieden, who had all the patents of IG Farben, this is also Palme's grandfather. So you have Sven Palme and Voldemar von Knieden, both Palme.
And
Oh,
yeah, of course. This is, so Olof Palme, the Swedish prime minister, he was killed, murdered in cold blood, point blank,
yep.
on the steps, on the entrance to this house that had, it was not insurance company anymore. However, and now we're going to slide into crypto AG. However, located in this house during the war and so on, and that the in this house at this moment in time when the Swedish prime minister is murdered in cold blood,
Hmm.
sits something called the Stay Behind movement, which is the same as Operation Gladio. This is the NATO secret service, so to speak. It's the non-official part of the Five Eyes countries, more or less, that bases on what the Nazi regime tried to do, to leave people behind, to do all kinds of nefarious activities. That fell short because Europe were so destroyed. So the people that were assigned to that, the Germans that were assigned to do that, they were not really interested in that, and they had taken a heavy blow during the war as well. But this kind of operational strategy were immediately taken on by the allies and the Swedes, because Stockholm was the spy central during this war times, because Sweden was neutral,
Yeah.
and Switzerland. And
Hmm.
then we have the Bank for International Settlements. We have the Dulles brothers and so on. We can go on forever there, but
Yeah, but there is a connection, and the Dulles brothers, they were really close to the Wallenbergs here in Sweden. So you can
yeah,
see once again, it's really short. And
Yeah, the
basically,
Dulles brothers.
uh,
Sorry, go him. Go.
yes, yeah, I was just gonna say that basically the stay behind movements, if I understand correctly now, they are like few, like 20 men groups, 20 of well
cell
work,
compartmentalized cell compartment.
self-structured, yeah, paramilitary groups who are inside countries. So we have them in all countries around Europe, probably in America as well, and all around the world. And they are just one phone call away in case something needs to get done. You need to shoot a president, kill a prime minister, and they are just ready to cause friction, cause terrorist events,
Yeah,
and they are military trained to do that and do it very well, right?
exactly. And these entities
Yep.
could not operate without having communications,
Yeah, true.
And also, of course, they needed to have the intelligence communication, the information advantage.
Yeah.
So as early as in the beginning of the 1900s, we have Arvid Dam brought over to ASEA's cryptography department.
Yeah.
And here it all starts.
Yeah.
And a little bit later,
1917.
yeah, and just a little bit later on, and there is already a department because a young Mr. Hagelin is working there, straight off his studies at the engineering school and so on. He is born in Baku.
Yep.
So when little Boris, which will be the crypto AG guy for a long time, very well, we'll get to that. So he is running around in his shorts at Villa Petronella, where the kings of the Russian oil rules. And this is the Nobel family, as in the Nobel Prize, as in the Merchant of Death. So this is in 1892, he's born there. So he is there at the same time as Stalin is there, because Boris' father, he really likes this oil business in Baku and so on. So the Nobels hiring him to do it, to take care of their business there. So it's not very complicated. So after the Russian Revolution, the family will, of course, return to Sweden, and new mission together with the Nobel family. Suddenly they are starting a business within cryptology.
Yeah.
Based on Arvid Dam's patents and so on. Arvid Dam and the Nobel family will soon leave the business. They will go out of it. But the strangest things happen here. But suddenly, young Mr. Boris, he stops with this business, and he goes for a year to be an oilman at Standard Oil in New Jersey, at the Rockefellers. So, of course, that is not what he's doing. He is making a lifelong friendship with NSA, Mr. Friedman there. Yeah. They will have a lifelong. So they make the deal. They do the handshake. And Ericsson is already manufacturing these machines for the Crypto AG. So Crypto AG is just, it has a couple of different names before it moves to Switzerland, but doesn't really matter. So Ericsson manufacture these machines. So Crypto AG is just the front for the Wallenberg's empire to take the control over the information. Yeah. And they do it very quickly and very efficiently.
I'm just gonna
Everybody will be using these machines.
I'm gonna jump in with another cryptograph machine, which is the one that the Germans had, and we can segue back into where we are right now, just to give some context to why it is super important. Because the Germans, they had a G machine, which was their version, Gestafen, something called, I don't remember the name, but the G machine. And basically, when the Germans were in Norway, they could go through Sweden. They were also allowed to rent the telephone lines, the cables that went through, and they used them in Sweden. What happened was, there is a guy, Arne Berling. He was actually the one who solved this crypto yes. by sitting in his summer house with a pen and paper. And but what we didn't know, which has come out in a book, which is pretty much hidden, but inside this book it says that he was also the one that gave the blueprints for the G machine to Ericsson. And Ericsson is owned by the family Wallenbergs. So what they could do is that they set up copies of these G machines, and now they could basically listen in on all the communications that the Germans had that passed through Sweden, and over 30,000 papers of information during the Second World War. So it's super important, basically, these cryptograph machines, and you cannot
Yeah.
allow to have backdoors in them.
Yeah, and they kept it for themselves as well. They didn't share this to the allies or to anybody. They wanted to have the information advantage. Same thing with the Russians. You have this Operation Stella Polaris when you have to bring home, but the Russians were using the crypto AG machines, but they discovered, and they started to do double crypto on them.
Yeah.
Having their own on the side, but still using the machines and so. So Stalin was, from experience, he was rather suspicious of the Swedes. He went to Stockholm a couple of times, together with Lenin. Lenin is actually Swedish, or Swedish heritage.
Oh,
So you get it.
I've heard it, but how close to Sweden was he? Was he with like, grandfather or father's father?
Two generations.
Yeah.
He spoke Swedish.
Well, actually, the Russians, if you go back far enough, they're also Swedish. They come from Roslagen in Sweden, in Pellegolas, the skärgården, Pellegolas.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway.
That is why Putin starts his interview with Tucker Carlson and saying, hey, he knows that Tucker Carlson is like, he's pretty Swedish, actually, Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, he too. Yeah.
It's just a generation away. So Tucker is Swedish. He likes to go to the sauna. So he starts out with saying to Tucker, hey, we come from, from Rurik. You know this. And Tucker just, no, I'm American, more or less, You should know this. You are your Swedish heritage, more or less implicated from Putin. And then he tells the whole story about the Kiev regime and all of this, and his views and perspectives on the history there. So it's Viking heritage straight off.
And just that very few Swedes, and we are not taught in school that St. Petersburg, how many Swedes that lived there and businesses that was brewing in St. Petersburg.
Nobel was
massive.
The kings.
Yeah.
I have articles in English on that, so we can maybe post some of them.
And it's a little bit similarity to Chicago in America. It was a Swedish second largest city. So you have Chicago, you have St. Petersburg, and we do not learn this in school whatsoever.
No. And for the Swedish listeners, please be aware that the largest chunk of Swedes, they took the trip to or emigrated to the US. The top is in 1882, and Sweden is a small country.
Yep.
So, and the reason for so many Swedes, 1.6 million, to leave Sweden in the immigration era, and this is 25% of the population. But it is very, very easy. It's not complicated. They discovered that they were being put under the maritime law. They turned the counties corresponding to counties. They turned them into businesses, and quite a few with Swedes that had their head on a swivel. They said, "Hey, fuck it, this is not going good. Yeah. We take our chances. Let's go to the US." The official story is that we were starving, but that is not really. It doesn't really add up at all. So
you're saying that we were not. Because I've heard that story that it was very poor as well.
Well, we had a couple of bad years, but that is in the early 1860s. Then there is no big emigration. It will, the speed will warp up. So the big immigration is between 1870 to 1880. That's the big but the largest chunk is 1882. That is. And Sweden is a small country, so 25%, 1.6 million. And we are then the fifth or the sixth country in Europe. So we have like the big countries, France, Germany, Russia, which has, millions of people living there. Yeah. So this little small country with like 4 million, 4.5 or something, will contribute and be on that list. That we even on that list is like hilarious. So
yeah,
there were lots of people there.
And also to bridge it over to the IG Farben, that the devil's chemists and the paperclip, that a lot of them were transported also to America. So it's
Yeah.
always the bridges on and on.
Yeah.
The paperclip operation is, it's just a small part of what I call Operation Falukorv. So when I write this is the main operation. Operation Falukorv could be on a very broad perspective. The Vikings taken over Europe. The Vikings rescale, the Viking crown rescales with the East India companies and so on, and more or less, do private military naval business and gets a good chunk of the world. And then they get a taste for it, but they know that they need to be able to expand it. They need to really take control and modernize the banking system. And the world's first central bank, 1668, that sets the pace for this. The second is inside the city of London.
Yep.
So the world's first central bank is in Sweden, if anybody had missed this little critical information. It's just tiny little bank, and it's from the rock star of central banking, actually the guy who more or less conquered Europe to make the peace treaty of Westphalia 1648, which will create the national states and the central banking, all in his plan. And the following oligarchs, they just execute. There is a straight line going here.
Yeah.
And it goes to IG Farben. IG Farben is the output of this.
Let me build on top of that, because that's a great summarization of Operation Falukorv. It also continues in the beginning of the 20th century with the telecommunication infrastructure, and that is also why keeping your information on the lines. Today we have internet. Back then it was the telephone lines. But you gotta have a cryptograph machines, right, to confuse. You can say it creates abracadabra that goes on the line, right? And basically, with these machines, crypto AG, the first order that Boris Hagelin got, it was 5,000 units, and he sold it to France in the beginning of the 30s, and after that, both NSA, initially they didn't want to make a deal with Boris, but after the Second World War, they started to buy in units. So it's through NSA that it has gone to the CIA, and to the CIA it has been exported all over the globe. And I actually have a little list of some countries. So we have, for example, here Austria, Czechoslovakia, Greece, Vatican City, which is very important, Spain, Portugal, Egypt, Morocco, Nigeria, Congo, South Africa, Iran, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, United Arab Emirates.
Yeah.
It just goes on and on. Japan.
At the peak of it, 120 countries are using this machine, military, intelligence, and of course then government and banks.
Yeah. And
the Five Eyes countries, including Sauron's Eye in the sixth country.
Yeah, the sixth country, the sixth eye.
The Sauron, the all-seeing eye of Sauron.
And it came out an article here in the Swedish newspaper that I can link, and I can have it translated, because it's very interesting. It is called this intelligence agents coup of the times, or whatever you want to call it.
The largest intelligence community scandal ever. Yeah. Operation Boris is the title on the book.
Because these 120 countries that you mentioned there, it turns out that all these crypto machines had backdoors in them.
Yeah.
And the one who controlled the hardware, the cables, the telephone lines, were actually able to listening
to,
the whole time since after the Second World War.
Yeah, and even during as well. So different countries were as the Russians were using them and so on. So
and also to bridge and clarify a quick snippet is that you mentioned NSA, the CIA, and there we have the first boss of the CIA is the Dulles, who was the private lawyer for the Wallenbergs in the Nuremberg trials. Just to snip that in.
Good one.
Yeah, and they were participating earlier on with writing, they were with handling the banking, of course.
And they were also, the Dulles brothers were also the lawyers during IG Farben's main time. You know, they were working for Sullivan and Cromwell, and they were basically taking care of the patents, all the legal work, the jurisdictions for IG Farben. So it's just
and that little thing with American IG, which is the counterpart in the same hegemony. That is a pretty interesting list of people in that. That one is, they have to scrap that one. They will also sort of defend the Wallenberg brothers in the ABC, the American Bosch Corporation scandal. That will be later on, where the Wallenbergs actually are, feeling the pressure a little bit from the good side of the US people. They really try to stop them there, to stop their bank from being, outside of Mordor. So Bombadil was trapped for a while in his own country. This Tolkien writes about. Interesting thing about Tolkien, when we're talking about these crypto machines and so on, that he was working as an intelligence officer in the First World War with the cryptography and so on. He volunteered to be where they did the decoding in the United Kingdom. They even made a movie about it. I always forget the title. Where they broke the codes for the German subs machines and so on, the Enigma machines, which is the G machine. So the Swedes didn't have, maybe the Swedes handed it to them. Nobody knows, this is secret stuff. But he was not allowed. They didn't want him. He was a brilliant, but they didn't. He had already started to fight against sort of the
too smart for his own good.
Yeah, too smart for his own good. He stood up against the Norman Montague Ring, the boss of the British Central Bank or the English Central Bank, Bank of England, situated, of course, in City of London, as we said before, as of six. That's the second central bank in the world. That's the number 2, 1694.
It's funny when I read in Art of Cloaking, which is a fantastic book for anyone who want to delve deeper into the Bosch affairs and Allendal and how they protected Wallenbergs and the good guys that you mentioned in the US State Department. His name was Henry Morgenthau. He is the one that says that the Wallenbergs were saved more by the upcoming Cold War than their improved business
morals, ethics.
Business ethics and morale, which is very, very interesting. So you can actually see from a Swedish point of view, at least from my point of view, that is where they start to feel the heat. And obviously they do get away, but it's not like the American, like the State Departments forget about them. They are obviously on their hot trail now, but it kind of diminishes, it disappears. But you can read about it in the book. It's super.
That's the main reason why they walk straight out of the Nuremberg trials, being one of the largest owners. That is that they have these back doors and they have been listening in to both American side and both Allied side and Russian side. So they have the informational advantage. They could, point to war crimes or whatever. They had lots of blackmail on the different actors in this rather theatrical trial, you could say, in Nuremberg.
It just look at where most of the IG Farben companies of the 6 companies that still exist today.
Yeah.
What happened after the trials with the so-called IG Farben, and where are they today?
They're still around. Maybe some of them have changed the logo, but not all of them.
But we have Bayer, for example.
Yes. BASF.
Yes. And we have, how do you spell it? Hocht?
Hocht.
Hocht.
That's German. There is no really British English translation for that. You have to say it like German. Hocht.
Yeah.
What is the Monsanto?
Here for the first time, it's just to bridge it to the food as well. You have the Bayer and the Monsanto.
Yeah,
Sorry, guys, people came in.
Didn't Monsanto buy Bayer? Or have I got it?
No, Bayer bought Monsanto. Fuck it, it doesn't really matter. But that they are linked. So the pharmaceutical industry, the food industry, the banks.
And then we have the second. Then we have the second morphing here, or actually the third morphing. But that is the morphing from IG Farben to Vanguard, BlackRock, and in between or on top, Investor.
Yeah.
Which is the Swedish.
It's a very little circle. And I read in Tragedy and Hope that there is a guy from General Electrics, and I think it is like around the beginning of the 19th century or even the end of the 18th century, where he says that around Europe there are 300 people who pretty much control everything, all the industrial revolution and the banks and everything. So this has been going on for a long time. Now it's just a smaller, and it's concentrated here in Sweden.
Even worse in the US, the Wallenberg family and all of these, the Schiffs, the Morgans, and all. I mean, these are the friends of the Wallenbergs. Sometimes they will, have some internal battles, but they are, working together. So the Peugeot committee will discover that the whole US industry in banking is just a hegemony with a few people running it.
Mm-hmm.
And they are blowing the lid open. But since the US is sort of, the coup d'etat, I would call it that, that happens in 1871 has already set so many corrupt people in the US government that they don't really get a reaction from it.
Yeah.
So they can continue. And this is just prior to the Fed, to Woodrow Wilson signing off on the Fed. 1871
is when they introduce Washington D.C. or right? Is it?
Well, we are talking about the add-on amendments. That is, this is when the Constitution are being put aside. So this is this is just a few years after that Sweden did the same thing and put sort of the people inside the country under admiralty law, which is old Hansa law, which is old Viking seafarer law out of Visby, where actually Carl Ludwig is sitting right now.
Yeah. Right
at
now.
The epicenter of the nefarious law.
Wow.
That's it. Boom. All the synchronicities
Viking.
And the synergies in these times are legendary.
Everything is connected.
Yeah.
We are all one.
Yeah. We all one, and we need to fight.
But I like these conversations because we are bridging the gap to the English-speaking audience, and we do have since we are Swedish people, and the deep state today, the headquarters is here in Sweden. We obviously we're looking at this from a different perspective. We're much closer to it, So I feel like we're doing a great job. It's kind of like our duty to share this to the English-speaking world so that they also can do their own research. Don't take our word for what we are saying, but I will put some links in the description, and hopefully you'll do your own research.
Yeah.
And I'm 100% with you, and what I would love just to bring, you don't have to do that, and that depends on you, Bombadil. But what we started before we started recording, just to put some ethos in the pathos, ethos, logos, triangle of all of this, to go a little bit as much as you want, but you just understand where you come from and projects that you've been part of, so you actually understand that with all that knowledge that you have, it also have a lot of weight with all that you have seen and projects that you've been part of. Is that something that you, because I see it as
we can
important.
touch it. We can touch it briefly. I've been the career have been a rather strange one. I started out young and did my military service and so on, and then I wanted to be a journalist. I was thinking, to actually to be an officer or so on, but that didn't. I could not buy into the kind of military stuff, so I just left after the duty that you had to serve, and then I said no, fuck this, and then I wanted to be a journalist to write about stuff like this. I've had some inputs from wise men and women, but I also got some advice just barely kicking off that activity to say, if you don't really want to get in trouble, or even worse, do not go down this road now. And this is a chief editor that were working on the only Swedish newspaper, and I worked in the remains of it. I could say there was only one Swedish newspaper that stepped up and against the eugenics, against the Second World War, against the Swedish involvement in it, and tried to do something about it, but they were shut down, more or less. They could not write about it. They wouldn't get any paper to print on. They searched for another supplier. There were no suppliers. So it ended up with that they didn't write any text, but they put headlines and blank papers in the newspaper.
Yeah.
They knew these guys. They knew the
then,
Warburgs, they knew the Wallenbergs, they knew what they were up to. This was obvious for let's call it quite many Swedes at this point in time.
And that
in the
and
1930s, 40s.
Yeah, and then that moved you into the engineering.
Yeah. So I had to do something else, and I slid into engineering somehow, some way, and I ended up on a you could call it an expert firm, and it will go actually straight to Henry Ford now, because the only guy that Henry Ford lifted his hat for, it was a Mr. Johansson, and he was the geometrical assurance guy that Henry Ford picked out of Sweden to lift his factory. So that kind of line, the mathematical stuff, the tolerance chain calculations and so on, and driving industrial projects such as cars and so forth, oil industry as well, and buses and so on. So I've been working for the big companies. I have some insights in those from industrial engineering, you could say. I know quite a few people that works with inside the military industrial complex, if you want to put it that way. I even actually had the honors to do some visits and check out the jet fighter facilities and so on in Linköping, Sweden, where you build this, maybe one of the world's better jet fighter aircrafts, actually. There is a funny story about this. So Saab the logo of Saab is a Junker bomber from the Second World War.
Yeah.
So during the peacetime, when Germany was put down and we were awaiting Ivar Krüger to kill himself with the wrong hand, shooting himself in the heart in Paris, after he had signed a deal with the Germans that made them, they were really on a bad side, and he gave them a loan of a substantial. He was the world's richest man at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
So Ivar Krüger, he had to die. That was one of the
Was Swedish.
Yeah, he was the world. He was a brilliant businessman, and he was actually part owner of Ericsson and so on. But he didn't want to do what the other, so he had to go.
Yeah.
So his empire was stolen, more or less, you could say. Just a couple of weeks after he died, there is a French company coming up, a French legal company coming up and telling that all these businesses were rotten, they were in bankruptcy and so on.
Oh, and
the Swedish state.
Also, just to jump in quickly, there was a royal commission from Sweden with Wallenbergs in the spearhead of this royal commission, but it wasn't even officially royal, right?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
It wasn't. And there was a big scandal among many Swedes in this part of the time, because there was no autopsy on his body, which was very swiftly from Paris to Sweden to be, that was refused for the first time. There was uproar on and now things getting strange. It's a very strange suicide, you could say. It's the classification of suicide on that one is very strange. And also his brother in arms, you could say, that tried to counteract or keep the beast under control. And the beast is not the Fed in this case. The beast is the Bank for International Settlements, which is created by the Wallenbergs. So he tried to keep that under control. That's the sort of it was to handle war reparations, which is an invented thing from the oligarchy to make more money, more or less, so that the banks always will win all wars, regardless. Yeah. So at this point in time, Aristide Briand is helping Ivar Krüger out, but he dies under very suspicious circumstances. So it is at his funeral. On the morning they signed with Germans, then there is the funeral, then he goes home to the hotel and shoots himself, which is, and it should be a good day signing off that enormous loan.
Yeah, he was so happy.
Just understand what would that consequence of the result of that loan actually make?
It would, the intention of it was to bring Germany back on their feet, because they were put down. They were held down after the war. And this is intentional, of course.
Yep.
After the First World War. So we are very clear about this. They had a very rough time. Though IG Farben is producing, but they cannot produce any weapons. So weaponry, well, Sweden is pretty good at that. So there are some patents. There is this deal with Krupp and so on. But the airplane logo, the Junker bomber on the Saab, is that a whole lot of German engineering is moving to Sweden, and we are building these bomb planes for the elite forces of Germany. And this is when Germany is not allowed due to the Versailles Treaty. They are not allowed to. They just have a small standing army with fine caliber guns, nothing else. They are not allowed to have anything. So what do you do? And at this point in time, the relations between Sweden and Russia is not that bad. Or Stalin knows that he needs to fake it. I think he has his point of view pretty clear, but so in these early 20s, Lenin is kicking back 500 tons of gold for the coup.
For the revolution in the Soviets, right? So, what was it that happened there with the with all that gold?
Litvinov, which is the right hand of the gun runner, the fixer, the man. He actually comes from the region of Ukraine, where you still have a blue and yellow flag with the 3 crowns on.
What was his name? Sorry, I didn't catch the name.
Maxim Litvinov.
Okay, yeah.
I have his bio. He has written some stuff, but he is one of the shady, he was involved with Trotsky on the first attempt as well, so this is a shady person. But he wrote some memoirs, or had help writing some memoirs, which is quite interesting actually. So they shipped the Social Democrat Bolsheviks, which will be communist Bolsheviks later on, but they are not that at this point in time, sort of. It's somewhere in between. So they have the friends, the Social Democrat here in Sweden, the ideological friends. So this is considered to be the largest gold heist in the history of mankind.
Mm-hmm.
And the Swedes doesn't have it. They don't. Many do not have a clue.
It kind of makes.
And the bloody banker, the bloody bank man. What is his name?
Olof Aschberg.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because I just learned what you said previously, is that Lenin was 2 generations back Swede, and he went to Sweden. We talked about this in our previous the second episode in English. So Lenin went to Sweden. He took the night train. He took a big detour. He could have gone much faster to do. So he goes and gets the money in Sweden. He goes to do the revolution, right? Yeah. And then he kicks back 500 tons of gold to Sweden. What happened to this gold? Where is it now?
Well, the history really doesn't tell that.
Yeah,
it's sort of. The official documents are not there, so you can't, so.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting.
But since back in that time you could pay in gold, so I would, on logical, to build up the IG Farben, which explode the factories everywhere, weaponry. Boom, boom, boom. Everything happens after 1933. It goes in rocket speed after that.
Yeah, it kind of funds. It kind of funds probably a lot more like the whole German, the weapon machine. And I've also learned that such a big percentage of the steel that kept the German war machine rolling forward came from Sweden. About
50%.
Bro, it says It says in the Netflix Narvik movie, it says it was 90%.
Yeah. Wow. But no, it's the Jan Malm was 50%. Yeah. What is Jan Malm in English?
Iron
ore. Yeah, that was 50%, but the steel was 90%.
Imagine if it was 95%. Everybody would think that it was us that did the war thing, but obviously it wasn't, right?
Yeah. Neutral. Under the guise of neutrality, just as Switzerland. I'm going to finish up so the story with these airplanes is that we are building the German airplanes, but we are not putting guns on them. We are putting Swedish insignias on them, and they fly them to Russia, and they equip them. So simply, the German or the Swedes or whoever, we don't really know, they just rent a large chunk of land in Russia to practice.
Oh.
Because that is not in Germany, so they are sending the to-be pilots, for practicing with these aircrafts and developing. And
did the Swedish neutrality play part in is that the reason the Germans choose Sweden, or were there other?
Well, I really don't think so, but I think it was the IG Farben interests that wanted to keep this under control.
Yep.
These bombers were very critical to keep under control, and of course the patents and all of this, the usual stuff. So all of these patents will end up in Sweden with Waldemar von Knier a little bit later on. And that is, of course, a good platform to start. The Germans had really good airplanes compared to the rest, sort of in the, in this First World War and so on. And then the German industry just kicks the motor in. It goes from second gear, 1932, Eva Krieger has to die, and it goes straight into fifth gear in 1933. It's so something had to finance this. So logically, maybe that gold could have some part of it. There are lots of bank mergers and things happening at this point in time also. That is such an intricate history with the Hambro Bank, with the Kuhn and Loeb, with the Warburg Bank. It's just a big mess of banks and IG Farben doing quite strange things to get the speed up in the prelude to the Second World War.
And one thing that you do so brilliantly, Mr. M, and it made me laugh, is how you put in this, like when Bombadil said the Falukorvian, and it comes up this Falukorvian, that you should do this just to point out the view, how open it was back in time with, for example, and now you can do the logo up here with the Cyclone B can.
Yeah.
Just as an example back in the day, because the Swedish flag was on the can, just because the information flow was so different back then.
Yeah.
But just as an example how open it actually was in many ways.
Yeah.
And that, of course, fits into the narrative, but the reality might have looked a little bit different. But nevertheless, the Cyclone B can is there. Then, of course, there are lots of discussions about this, but we cannot talk about it because then we're going to get thrown into jail.
We cannot revise it right now, but there are questions, of course. I think we should be allowed to question all of history, and it doesn't matter. It's kind of strange. It's kind of pointing it out. They're kind of pointing in a direction, saying we cannot question that one. It's almost like telling a little kid you're not allowed to push the button. That's exactly what we're gonna do. Then we're gonna revise that part of history, and I think it's in everybody's interest to do that, because we cannot allow censorship in that it's going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, because if you start with this one, you can then the next one can be that you're not allowed to question the monetary mechanics.
Boom. Yeah.
Or say IG Farben.
Yeah.
Believe me, that investigation from the Swedish government in 1999, the book of the art of cloaking, it comes out in 1997, and so it's a clean up damage reduction operation. The investigation is far from complete. You could easily say, but they had to do it to to accommodate. I would really like to see the American archives. There are for sure some stuff there that could be dug up and revise the history. But if somebody had a blackmail on important persons. Yeah. And of course, then we go straight to Patton. He went to Sweden. He most likely learned about Stella Polaris, and he most likely, because he was a friend of Carl Bonde, they competed in the Olympics some decades before. So they knew each other.
In Sweden.
Yeah, in Sweden. So
just to clarify, who is Carl Bonde and who is Patton?
General Patton is the most straightforward guy in a general of a certain kind, a leader, a true leader, which from a military perspective was brilliant, and he was admired. He was from the States. United States, of course. So he's like somewhat of a kind of for the soldiers and for the army, somewhat of a like Smedley Butler, which of course is blowing the whistle on a good try, actually, what is called a business plot. So at the same time in 33, as we have the Riksdagsfire, some shady elections and the little guy with the mustache and his entourage get into power. They tried once before in 1923, the beer hall plot, but they failed epically. Yeah. And Göring gets shot and he gets onto the drugs, and there's some stories about that, But IG Farben was very good on drugs. They were selling
what
heroin.
happened to Mattis in 1933?
What happened to
Mattis, general? No, sorry. Patton. Patton was in Sweden, and he met.
This is after the war. This is after the war. So I slid into Smedley Butler. So Smedley Butler blew the whistle on the business plot, which was a very serious attempt to overtake America fascist coup style, with the World War I veterans and their favorite officer, which will be Smedley Butler. He was very, very appreciated among the American forces. So they tried to trick him into do a fascist coup d'état in the United States. And he played the card well, and then he was, ridiculous. He was shamed. They threw everything they could at him when he stepped up to the Congress and tried to blow the whistle on this. But he stopped it anyway. It never lifted. So there's a lot of things happening here at the same time. Krieg had to die, and then So after the war, one of the supreme officers above Patton was supposed to go on tour in Sweden for some reason, but Patton but he declines, and Patton does this instead, and he ends up at Carl Bonde's residence, where, funnily enough, microfilms and information from Operation Stella Polaris, which is then the backdoor listening in, the paperwork of that. It for some reason it's stored in his sort of mansion, and what happens there we really don't know. But when Patton was supposed to go to a church in where we have the Swedish Ivory League school, so to speak, or university, he refuses. He said, "No, it reminds me of my death." He says, "I don't like it. I will not attend the church." And he goes back to Germany. There is attempted assassination. He survives it. He recovers miraculously and is in good shape. And then suddenly he gets very sick and dies.
Yeah. He also said something very...
Yeah, he said something, and there are many misquotes on this. He said simply, because he could not say it straight out, he said, "We were fighting the wrong enemy all along." And then some people will add that it should be the Russians or whatever, but I would say that he said just that, because he But here
we're
are
fighting.
the historical.
So there's an American general that says we fought the wrong enemy.
Yeah, after he was in Sweden.
Yeah, after he was in Sweden, and then about a month or so later, maybe 1 month later, he dies.
Some weeks actually, not even a month. Then
during
then there is the
circumstances.
assassination attempt, but he's in the hospital for a while, so it takes some time before he gets mysteriously ill and dies in the hospital.
Yeah, and it was some crazy stuff there with the doctors, their journals, and whatever they gave him. There was I read an article about it before. Very, very strange circumstances.
Yeah, very strange. It is almost as strange as Rudolf Hess, that after sitting in the Spandau prison for 45 years or something like that, he was imprisoned after the war. He made a flight, jumped parachute, landed on the wrong yard in Scotland. He was supposed to make a deal with the British, but it failed because he landed on the wrong yard. and he ended up in the and when he gets the fantastic news that he's going to be let free, he gets to be so happy that he hangs himself with the wire, or electric wire.
Yeah, he killed himself like Epstein, and like
Yeah.
Kruger,
Yeah.
and like Patton. Patton didn't kill himself, but very strange circumstances around these people who kind of have insight and damaging information about the deep state. The Wallenbergs here in Sweden.
Yeah, and of course their friends, the Morgans, the Rockefellers, and so on and so forth. The Bush family is always present as well.
Yeah.
And as to this day, Rumsfeld worked between his two defense ministry posts in the first Bush administration and the second Bush administration. Donald Rumsfeld, this is the guy with the Pentagon, the 9/11, those trillions missing. This is the same guy. He works for ABB Atom, today Westinghouse. He works and sells. He is operative on the board when they are providing North Korea with the nuclear equipment that you need to be able to manufacture a nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
Former ASEA with the swastika from Eric von
Yeah.
Rosen.
Yeah.
Boom.
See how it all goes circle. Like we can just keep doing laps. I just want to, if people are still listening, thank you for being here around the campfire. We really, really appreciate that you pay attention. We have gone through, if it's a lot of new information for you, we have gone through a lot of important like the basics. If you rewind this episode and you listen to it, you research the names that we mentioned, you will have a very good grasp around the Second World War and the situation with Sweden and the deep state. That's it.
Winston Churchill, actually, since he failed epically with the Norwegian stuff, where they also manufactured the heavy water, he got really irritated on the Swedes. So there were actually a threat that was just hours away from the UK to attack Sweden.
Yeah.
At one point in time, and this is the guy that overrides the British chain of command and bombs Berlin. That's the first time that you start bombing seriously, serious. This is the first time in history when you're so this guy, he will be the first honorable citizen of the United States of America. The second honorable citizen of the United States of America will be Raoul Wallenberg. Put there, let's say, lobbied there by a young Mr. Biden. Joe Biden, as in the current, resident or president or whatever we should call him. Same guy.
Yeah, Biden. And he was, Raoul, obviously, was found in Belgium or in Hungary by the Soviets. He was probably captured. And Joe Biden has been in Congress in America asking for the papers to what happened to Raoul Wallenberg. But Stalin has famously quoted or famously said, and I quote, that we are going to use those papers for blackmail against the people who collaborated with the Nazis before the 1933-ish.
Yeah, who collaborated all the way, sort of.
Yeah, from the beginning. I think looking at all of this, I think Swedish, we are, it hurts to say it, but we kind of like the original Nazis here.
Yeah, the OG.
100%.
Yeah, it's sad to say that, but that's just the reality, the truth. And Putin has famously also said that Sweden is going to be a what do you say, like a mentor country,
Pre-example
to Ukraine, and he has also said that he's going to denazify Ukraine. So,
Yeah.
Make your own assumptions.
The big boys are talking the big language,
I think
so to speak.
we are going to start to slowly wind down. I think we have had a very, very great episode with tons of information, and hopefully our friends around the world will find this interesting. Please share this to English speakers, like, subscribe, and you know what to do. Smash that like button.
Smash
Smash
that.
it. Smash it
And
hard.
I love speaking to you boys. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining in, and really appreciate your knowledge around the virtual campfire. And it is awesome because when we talk like this, for example, if I have an episode by myself, you don't think about all of this, but when I hear Bombadil say something, and then Lura, you just get an idea and pops it in there, and then something triggers in me, and we can just like go around in a circle and share the information. I think it's beautiful. I think this is sort of the future.
Mm.
That is
Yeah.
beautiful. We have so much more to tell, but we have to keep it within some kind of time frame. But
Yeah.
it is beautiful talking to you boys, the young generations. You are the ones that gonna carry this. As I said, I am expendable. My mission is to relieve myself of duty as soon as there are enough people picking this one up.
Yeah.
We need to do this.
Yeah, and we will do that with. I like what you said in our first episode. We will do it with light stride and pride.
Yes.
Yes, no problems. So yeah, I think this has been awesome, guys. Good to end here. What do you say?
Sounds good. And the
Sounds
next
good.
one is just continuation of it, because as Bombadil and M and we say, there's shitloads more to talk about. So yeah. Holy fuck.
It is,
Oh,
but this has been. I think I would say that the dynamics. Yeah, I had a bit of a long-winded, the start of this, but that was just to get it going. I so enjoyed to hear you guys, the train of thoughts that you have, that is inspiring to get this long train moving ahead. It is a mission, but we have to start. When you're standing knee deep in shit and you have a shovel, then you start to shovel.
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.